Welcome to Mrs. Leland's learning journey on the cell membrane. We have three aims for today. The first one is what is the plasma membrane? And I'm going to tell you right now that it's another name for the cell membrane. So we can either use the word plasma or cell membrane. We're talking about the same thing. We also should be able to explain the two main molecules found in the plasma cell membrane and how they interact with each other in the cell. And also we're going to explain the jobs of the three types of proteins found in the cell membrane. I want to remind you that at any time during this Explain Everything, please push pause and fix your notes as we go. Today our first question is our true-false question, and that is that cell membranes advertise themselves to other cells. Yes or no, true or false? I want to remind you, if you need extra time during this Explain Everything, to push pause to give yourself some time either to look up your answer in your comprehension constructor or just to quiz yourself. So the answer is actually yes. Cells do advertise themselves to other cells. We're going to talk about what that means in a little bit. As I said earlier, that the cell membrane has another name, and it's called the plasma membrane. So I will be using the words cell membrane and plasma membrane interchangeably with one another. They mean the same thing. Cell membrane, plasma membrane has two important characteristics. The first one is that it's very flexible and fluid-like. You can see that with this amoeba on the bottom left-hand corner here. The cell membrane, the outside edge of it, is very flexible. It's not a straight line. It's very fluid-like. This amoeba will actually move in one direction, and its cytoplasm will ooze into one of these, what's called a pseudopod. And the amoeba is able to move in this manner because its cell membrane is flexible and fluid-like. It's also semi-permeable, semi meaning partial, permeable meaning allowing to move through. And cell membranes allow some molecules to pass through but not others. You can see here these little tiny holes. Some objects are allowed to go through them, some are not, and this is true about the cell membrane. The cell membrane is composed of two main molecules. The first one is something called a phospholipid, and this makes up the majority of the cell membrane. If you did that activity on the cell membrane app on the iPad, you'll put a bunch of these together and hopefully remember that this is the main component of the cell membrane because you would have put a lot of them together to make the cell membrane. There's this piece right here which is the water-loving head, meaning that it loves water, so it's hydrophilic. And this part right here is a lipid, fatty acids, and it's water-fearing. It does not like to be near water. You need to make sure that your notes have a picture of this phospholipid in it. This right here is a picture of a layer, or a phospholipid bilayer, bi meaning two, where on the outside here we have extracellular fluid. So the outside of your cells are constantly being bathed in water. So it's got a lot of water. And you'll notice that the phospholipid head pieces are, the water-loving pieces are facing the water. On the bottom here we have inside the cell. And inside the cell is mostly cytoplasm, right? So there's water inside the cell. And you'll notice that there we have those phosphate groups that have a charge to them. They're water-loving and they line up there. In the middle here, we have our lipid layer, our fatty acids that don't like water, and they squeeze all the water out. That last picture I showed you was of 2 dimensions of the phospholipid bilayer, and cells are not 2-dimensional, they're 3-dimensional. So this model better represents what an actual cell phospholipid bilayer would look like. So the yellow pieces are the lipid tails that hate water. So right here you can see where the tails are all bunching up together. These red pieces on the outside are the parts that love the water. So outside the cell here we have a lot of water. Then the lipid piece that hates water, they bunch up in the middle, and then we have this other layer on the inside of the cell that loves water. And that allows the cells to be 3-dimensional. Now, using all the information that you were just given about cell membranes, I want you to think about what would happen if we pushed a small needle into a cell membrane. This right here is an example of actually piercing through the cell membrane. So right here you can see this pipette that's being pierced through this right here, the cell membrane. And they're actually, this is in vitro fertilization where they're taking the DNA from a sperm cell and entering it into an egg cell, or else they could be removing the DNA from a cell. But you can see right here that the needle is put through the cell membrane, and right here, this one, after being exposed to the needle, just self-seals. It's so cool. Look at that. Okay, not only do we have phospholipids, but they're also proteins. So the main component of a cell membrane are phospholipids. The second type of molecule found in a cell membrane are going to be proteins. When we get done talking today, I don't know what's going on with this arrow. When we get done talking today, you're going to need to identify the three main kinds of proteins. Yes, I have no idea. Okay, and they're going to be found embedded and scattered throughout the membrane. So we have 3 arrows. I have no idea, guys, what the heck's going on, but I'm just going with it. All right, proteins, 3 main types. Try to back it up so you can push pause on this slide. I'm going with this. All right, next slide. Okay, 3 types of proteins. First type is the channel protein, and the channel protein goes through the entire membrane. And by that I mean, if you look down over here, since my normal arrow is not working, I got to figure out how to use other types of arrows. Let's see here. Let's use this green one. Okay, so this channel protein provides a tunnel for specific molecules to pass through. So this right here, it's the entire membrane, right? So here's our phospholipid bilayer. Water-loving heads, water-fearing tails, channel protein, different shapes. Remember, the most important thing about a protein is its shape. And shape determines what specific molecules can go through. So we have 2 different channel proteins here, 2 different shapes, 2 different types of molecules that can pass through. The second protein that we're going to look at is called the marker protein. And it's also called a glycoprotein. That word is not going to be on any of the tests that we take in here, so you can just ignore that. What you need to write down is marker protein. And marker proteins don't necessarily go through the entire membrane. So what's important is this carbohydrate chain that's right here, and this right here is our marker protein. So we have a protein with a carbohydrate chain sticking off the end of it. And they act as name tags, and they identify the cell to other cells. This becomes important when we look at white blood cells. So you have these blood cells in your body that go around and they find foreign invaders like bacteria and viruses, and they engulf them and digest them with lysosomes, which we talked about before. But your white blood cells, that's their job, to gobble up cells, but they need to know which cells to gobble up and which ones to leave alone. And your cells contain these carbohydrate or these marker proteins that tell other cells in your body, hey, I belong here, don't gobble me up. And that's what your body uses to identify self from non-self. Third type of protein are called receptor proteins. And these things go through the entire membrane, and they receive, hence the name receptor, they receive and communicate information across the cell membrane. So if a cell needs to have a signal get sent outside the cell needs information to do a certain job, a receptor protein is what's enacted or used. And these receptor proteins have specific binding sites, specific shapes, and only certain molecules can fit. This fit piece becomes really important because if you have a specific type of hormone, for example, like adrenaline. Adrenaline has a specific shape to it. It hits a receptor protein that has a specific shape, and that allows that message of, hey, this is adrenaline, here's the cell's response for your cell to be activated. All right, so those phospholipids, remember this is the main part of your cell membrane, and the proteins work together to help keep the cells in something called homeostasis. Make sure you have that in your notes. Homeo meaning same, stasis meaning state. So your cells need to maintain a constant internal state in order to function properly. We're going to talk more about what homeostasis looks like. We're going to talk more about what things go across the membranes, what your body needs to do to pump some things out, make sure other things make it in so that your membrane, your cell has the same state throughout. I also want to mention these things right here that are in the middle of your cell membrane. This was something on that assignment that you guys did with the iPad app. And these right here are cholesterol. And cholesterol is used to maintain, to help stabilize your cell membrane. It was on the back page of your cell membrane app, there's a question. I don't have the question sheet in front of me, but it talks about helping give your cell membrane structure, and the answer to that are these cholesterol pieces. So you can go ahead and go back and fix that if you missed that piece. Okay, we're going to do a quick quiz. Make sure you hit pause so you have extra time to answer the question. First question is, everything small can pass through the cell membrane? Yes or no? The answer is actually false. So it depends upon shape, right? And small things can't always go through the cell membrane. If we have things that are polar, they can't get past the non-polar regions of the cell membrane, and you need to have specific proteins that allow things through. Next question, cell membrane proteins include all the following except marker proteins, receptor proteins, channel proteins, and phosphate proteins. The answer is phosphate proteins. Make sure you go back and have the other three listed and know what they mean for the test. Next question, which of the following allows cells to identify themselves to your other body cells? Hit pause. Okay, the answer to that are marker proteins, right? So marker proteins are proteins that mark your cell. Hello, my name is, and they tell your body that the cells belong, and they mark your cells. Which of the following allows cells to communicate with one another? The answer to that are receptor proteins, so they receive messages. Messages are specific to receptor proteins, right? We have to make sure that there is a fit between our protein shapes. Okay, which of the following makes up most of the cell membrane? The answer would be phospholipids, right? That's the majority. We then have embedded in phospholipids some proteins, but we have way more phospholipids than we have proteins. Okay, for your homework tonight, you're going to be your comprehension constructor for tonight. I want to make sure that you have these vocab words in your assignment before you do your reading. The first one is solute, and that's a dissolved particle. Solvent, substance doing the dissolving. In biology, our solvent is water, right? It's a universal solvent. We talked about water before. And solution, and that's a solute dissolved in a solvent. I'm going to give you an example with Kool-Aid. So with Kool-Aid, you start with a Kool-Aid packet, right? So those are little tiny particles of sugary goodness that we dissolve, and we dissolve them in our solvent, which is our water. When we get done, we have that Kool-Aid solution that we drink. So make sure you have those three words written down so you can get your homework done. Make sure if you have any questions that you wrote them down so you can ask me in class tomorrow. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you guys later. Bye.